Are you able to hear me and see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Okay, let's continue with where we stopped last class. So we were basically discussing about this scheduling algorithm, and last class we saw one of the simplest scheduling algorithm, what is known as FCFS, first come first serve algorithm. Let's continue and look at some of the other variations, and as usual we have taken the slides from the standard textbook. These are some of the other algorithm we are going to look into. SJF stands for shortest job first, and SRTF shortest remaining job first, and priority scheduling and round robin scheduling. Okay. So the next one is shortest job first, or in short we call it as SJF scheduling. Now what we try to do is with every process we try to find out what is the next expected length of the CPU burst that is required, right? So it is a bit hard to approximate guess the right one, but we can do a smart calculation and try to approximate that particular value over there. I don't know, because how long a particular process will run. It could be, we are not sure when that particular IO is going to occur and so on and so forth, but we can make a decent approximation of, based on the past history, we can make an approximation of when is this next likely IO interrupt is going to occur over there, so that I can calculate what is the amount of time a particular process is going to use if I take this particular present step over there. Now SGFs try to give you an optimal value in terms of minimum average waiting time for any given set of processes, but only problem is we should know how long the CPU requires in the next iteration over there. But for time being, let us assume that we are pretty good at guessing
Your
that
screen is not
particular
visible.
next arrival.
Sir, your screen is not visible.
Screen is not visible. Is it the same issue with everyone? Oh, sorry, the screen is not shared, I believe. Now, are you able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So, this is what we started with, right? So, this is the first slide for the today's class. Now, all that I was trying to tell you is we will make a decent approximation of how much time a particular CPU requires, if a particular process is required, if it is given the next chance. So it depends on when is that particular IO or some kind of interrupt is going to happen. So, but based on some of the past data, we will try to make an approximation over there. For time being, let us assume that we are able to do a good guesswork about this, and we'll see how shortage of first will do the scheduling process over there. Moving on to the next slide. So now we'll consider this particular example. There is process P1, P2, P3, P4 with burst time. This is the next burst time, next expected burst time of being 6 millisecond, 8 millisecond, 7 millisecond and 3 millisecond. As the name itself it indicates, shortest job first, whichever requires a shortest time, that is going to be picked up first, and then the next one and so on. The assumption here is all these processes have appeared at time 0, and we are not going to do any preemptive scheduling algorithm. It is going to be a non-preemptive SJF version that we are talking here. So if that is the case, in the last class we have seen how to write a Gantt chart. It is simply a basic bar chart with information like what is the start time, what is the end time for every process that's going to take up. So in this particular case, you know that the minimum burst time that is required is for process P4, which is 3 when compared to all other. This is the minimum. So first CPU will give preference to process P4. So between 0 to 3 millisecond, process P4 will be scheduled by the SJF scheduling algorithm, right? That's how I got this particular value here. What happens next? I'm going to look at the remaining process, whichever is having the shortest time, I'm going to pick that. So next, if you look at it is 6, 8 and 7, the minimum is basically 6. So I'm going to allocate the process P1 next for the indicated time, that is 6 minutes. So from when? From time interval 3 up to 6 minutes. That means time interval 9 millisecond. The process P1 is going to occupy the processor over there. So I'm done with P1, I'm done with P4. So I'm left with P2 and P3. Let us look at which is the minimum. P3 is minimum, which is 7 milliseconds. So you allocate P3 next in the Gantt chart from 9 plus 7, that is up to 16. 9 to 16, process P3 is going to occupy the processor, and at last I am left with only one process, that is P2. So it is going to occupy from 16 plus 8, 16 to 24 milliseconds of interval. So this is how SGF is basically going to allocate the processor to these different processes. Now look at the average waiting time. What is the waiting time of P1 now? You see P1 started at time 3, and our assumption is all these processes are going to appear at time 0. So basically P1 is going to wait for 3 minus 0, that is 3 time and 3 milliseconds. What about P2? P2 executed here. It started its execution at time interval 16. That also appeared at time 0. So 16 minus 0, you get it as 16 milliseconds. And P3 started its execution at 9th millisecond. That also appeared at 0th second. So 9 minus 0, it turns out to be 9 millisecond is the waiting period. And P4 started at 0th second. As soon as it came, it got the processor. So there is no waiting time for this. So since we are talking about average waiting time, so it is 3 plus 16 plus 9 plus 0 divided by 4 processor. That becomes 28 by 4. It turns out to be 7 milliseconds over there. Right? So let's quickly try to do what will happen if I try to do a FCFS algorithm on the same data set over there. First come, first serve. And can you quickly calculate the average waiting time over there? Calculate the average waiting time there. So if you do an FCFS, first come first serve, at time 0 process P1 is going to get the system up to time interval 6, and then comes P2 that will execute between 6 minutes plus 8, it becomes up to 14, and then from 14 plus 7 up to 21 P3 is going to occupy, and from 21 to 24 processor P4 is going to occupy, right? Are you able to get this Gantt chart? This is what I'm saying. First is going to be P1, then it is P2, then it is P3, and then it is P4. So P1 is between Gantt chart uh, GANTT, I believe. Gantt chart. Yes, yes. So P1 is between 0 to 6 second, then comes P2 that is between 6 to 14 second, and then P3 that is between 14 to 21 second, and lastly P4 between 21 to 24 second. Right? So this is how that particular chart will look, we might look like not exactly the chart, but this is the best I can write it in an online class now. Let us try to calculate what is the waiting time for each of them. P1 came as it is, so its waiting time is 0 and it started immediately. P2 came at 0th minute and it started its execution at the 6th minute. So waiting time of P2 is 6. Right, waiting time of P1 is 0 and that of P2 is 6 minutes. What about P3? It came at 0, its execution started at 14th minute. So that is basically 14 milliseconds for P3. And P4 came at 0th minute and its execution started at 21st millisecond. So its waiting time is this much. So now you look at the average of this. So summation of this is 41 divided by 4. It turns out to be 10.25 milliseconds over there. Right? So it's FCFS scheduling. If the same thing was followed, then we would have end up in getting 10.25 millisecond for this particular process. Whereas SJF has reduced that to 7 milliseconds. So there is a considerable improvement in the average waiting time that we are able to achieve it here. Clear? So along this average waiting time, one more important thing that we need to see is what is the average turnaround time? What is turnaround time? Do you remember? What is turnaround time? Anyone? Last class we have seen. It's the time to execute the process. That's basically CPU burst time, not the turnaround time. To switch to another process, that is context switching time or dispatch latency, you are saying. No, not that one. Time to execute a process performance metric. Achyut is copying the title of the slides. No, it's a performance metric, that is correct. It's not time to execute. So Anjali is right now. It's the time from the creation till termination of the process. So as soon as the job gets created, it will come and join the ready queue. So how long it will take in order to complete its job? So it includes the execution time, it includes the waiting time as well. So that is basically turnaround time. So that is another important metric for us, right? So look at what is the turnaround time if I would have used the FCFS algorithm, right? So let us type in here itself turnaround time for each process. So again the same processes P1, P2, P3, P4, and if you have used FCFS, P1 came at time 0 and it terminated at 6 seconds. So turnaround time of P1 is 6 millisecond. Turnaround time of P2, it completed at 14th second millisecond and it came also at 0th second. Turnaround time of P3, it completed at 21 millisecond which also arrived at 0th second. So it is basically 21 minus 0 and of that of P4 is 24 milliseconds over there. Is it clear? Turnaround time. And if you look at the average turnaround time, it turns out to be 16.25 millisecond in case of FCFS algorithm there. Clear guys? Let us move forward and see what will happen in the SJF algorithm with respect to turnaround time. You see turnaround time of process P1 in this particular case is how much? P1 completes its execution at time 9 and our assumption is all of them arrived at time 0. So turnaround time of P1 is 9. What about P2? P2 completed at 24th millisecond, so this is also 24. What about P3? It is 16. What about P4? It is basically 3, right? So look at the average turnaround time. So it is 24, 16, 30, 40, 49 plus 3, 52. 52 divided by 4 turns out to be 13 millisecond in this particular case, right? So it was 16.25 in case of FCFS algorithm, but it is once again reduced in case of SJF algorithm over there, right? So in the test exam you can get this kind of numerical, some scheduling they'll ask you to write a Gantt chart as well as calculate the average waiting time, average turnaround time, and so on. So you should be familiar with these calculations. Now, the big question is, how do I know these burst times? These are the next expected burst time 6, 8, 7, 3. How do I get this particular thing? We can basically try to approximate it with the help of this particular formula. We are expecting it to follow an exponential averaging. So if I can expect the next burst time as tau n plus 1, which is basically alpha times Tn, the last burst time, plus 1 minus alpha time historical burst time of all the processes. So it is tau n over there. Now alpha is basically a constant which is trying to strike the deal between it. So its value ranges between 0 to 1. If I set alpha equal to 0, then the most recent one does not get any importance. So it is basically burst time is simply the average of all the turnaround time which is done in the history. If I set alpha equal to 1, the lost history goes for a toss. Only the recent one is basically considered. So there has to be a balance between these two in order to get a good approximation. For that choice, we generally set alpha equal to half, so that it gives some equal kind of weightage between the most recent process and the historical processes over there. So using this, we will be able to approximate the expected burst time for the coming things. Now this is what is shown here, the CPU burst time, whatever we have approximated using the same formula. And this is this is the actual one, and this is what is approximated over there. And we started at the time 0, it is going to be 10. So for the next process, it is going to be half into 10 plus 1 minus alpha is again half into the most recent one. So that is half of 10 plus half of 6, that turns out to be 8. So we make a guess that it's going to be 8. And the next one is becomes half of 8 plus half of 4, that basically becomes half of 12, that is 6. Next one is half of 6 plus 6, that turns out to be 6. Next one is half of 6 plus 4, that turns out to be 5, and so on. So like this we'll be able to make an approximation when we try to implement this particular thing, right? Now that was a non-preemptive version that we saw, and let us see what will happen if it becomes a preemptive version. So if you remember last class we have seen a preemptive version. Preemptive means when something is going to come and it gets a priority, and the lower priority one is going to be the processor is snatched from that particular process and handed over to a higher priority thing. So now in this particular version of preemptive SJF, the priority comes with respect to minimum being the burst time. So that is going to get a higher priority. That's all is going to be the change. Now the one other modification that we are trying to do here is the arrival times are different here. So all processes are not going to arrive at the same time, right? So let us consider this particular data over here. Now there are four processes, P1, P2, P3 and P4, and they have their arrival time. So P1 is arriving at time 0 millisecond, P2 at first millisecond, P3 is at second, and P3 at fourth millisecond. And what you see is the burst time is once again an approximated one. It is 8, 4, 9, and 5. Now let us try to apply the preemptive SJF and write the Gantt chart for this. Again at time 0, you see how many processes are available to us at time 0? How many processes are there in the ready queue at time 0? You need to give me an answer, otherwise I will not continue further. Okay, so Anjali, it's not 4, it is 1. You see the data here. Arrival time at time 0 is only one process, that is only P1 has arrived. So others are going to come at a later point. So we are looking at a different data now. So at time 0 only P1 process has arrived. So because of that P1 will only get the processor over there. So there are no other people competing. So P1 gets the processor, and let us say it is up to time interval 1 millisecond. At first millisecond, how many processes are there? Now there are two. There was P1 and now P2 also joins the race over there. Right, so I'm not able to see your responses, so I'm coming out of this full screen mode over here. So at time interval 1, there are two processes who are competing for the resource, that is P1 as well as P2. Now what does this our preemptive SJF basically says is, whenever there is a competition, give the processor to the one which require minimum remaining time. Can you tell me what is the minimum, what is the remaining time for process P1 and what is the remaining time for process P2? You got my question? At 1 millisecond, P2 also came into picture. We need to know what is the minimum remaining time of processor P1, process P1 and process P2. Yes, Durga Lakshmi, you are right. Bhargav, you are correct. P1 is already executed for 1 millisecond. So the minimum remaining time of process P1 is 7 millisecond, whereas P2 came just now. So it has got a remaining time of 4 millisecond. So the minimum among them is 4. Because of that, P2 is going to get the processor. Right? P2 is going to get the processor. How long? Till the next job comes and it preempts or it completes the job. Let us see what happens next. At time interval 2, one more process comes into picture, into the ready queue, that is process P3. So let us examine what will happen at time interval 2 when P3 comes into picture. Now I have three processes, that is P1, P2 and P3, who are fighting for get the access of the processor. But who is having the minimum remaining time? You know that P1 remaining time is 7. You know that P2 remaining time was earlier 4, but now it has executed 1 millisecond. So it's basically 3. And P3's minimum time is 9. Required time is 9. So minimum among them is P2. So at interval 3, nothing changes. Nobody gets preempted. P2's time is still lesser, so it will continue to hold the CPU. What happens next? At time interval 3, P4 also comes into the race. The processor P4 also comes into the race. Now you have all four processes in ready queue or in the running state. That is P1, P2, P3, P4. The answer is very simple. If the shortest job is not on the processor, then go for preemption and assign it to a least time required processor. Now you see P1's remaining time is 7. P2's is now how much? it is 4 minus 2 because it has already executed for 2 milliseconds when I'm talking at time interval 3. So it's basically 2, where about P3 is 9 and P4 is 5. The minimum is still with respect to P2, and hence there is no preemption that is going to happen, and P2 will continue its execution up to 5th millisecond. Is this particular point clear? Any doubts, confusion to anybody? Okay, right. So then tell me which processor will get the which process will get the processor next and why? After 5th second, who will get the processor? Who will get the processor? P4. Yeah, P2 is completed. Now it is no more in the race. So I'm left with P1, P3, P4. You know that P1's remaining time is 7. P3 it is 9 and P4 is 5. Minimum among them is 5. Hence P4 will get the processor that is between 5 to 10. That is 10 milliseconds over there. P1 will also have the same, right? No, P1 is required time is 7. P1's required time is remaining time is basically 7. It came with requirement of 8 millisecond and it got in the only 1 millisecond in the beginning. So its remaining time is 7. P3's is 9 and P4's is 5. So we are going to look at minimum one. So it's going to be P4 for 5 seconds. Right? So what happens next after P4? The next remaining time. So P1 is 7 and P3 is 9. So 7 is minimum. So P1 gets it between 10 to 17. That's 7 second. And lastly, the only one remaining, that is P3, that's going to occupy for 9. So it is 17 plus 9. That means it will go up to 26 milliseconds over there. Right? Now let us see what is the waiting time for each of them. What about waiting time of processor P1? Can you calculate and tell me? Processor P1 arrived at time 0. As soon as it came, it got 1 second over there, and next chance came only by 10. So its waiting time is between 10 minus 1. It is 9 milliseconds. Is it right? Did you understood? P1 came at time 0. So between 0 to 1 it executed. That's why Gantt chart is helpful for us. And then it started its further execution from 10 seconds. So it is 10 minus 1. This 9 millisecond it was waiting. So waiting time of P1 is 9. So if you have understood, can you tell me what is the waiting time of processor P2? What is the waiting time of processor P2? Arnav, think. Bhargav, think. The processor P2 started its execution from first second and completed by 5th second. And what is the arrival time of processor P2? It is 1 second. So its waiting time is 0, right? It came at 1 millisecond and immediately it started its execution at 1 millisecond. It never waited anywhere. So the waiting time of processor P2 is basically 0. Are you getting this particular point? Correct, right? So now tell me what is the waiting time for processor P3? Process P3. What is the waiting time of process P3? Process P3 started its execution at 17th millisecond and it arrived at 2nd millisecond. So it is basically 17 minus 2. It is 15 milliseconds over there. Correct. Arnav, you have to be confident. Don't ask me a question, 15 question mark. You say it is only 15. You have to be that much confident when you are giving the answer. Right. What about P4? You see P4 execution started at time interval 5 and P4 came into picture at 3rd millisecond. So it is basically 5 minus 3. It turns out to be 2 milliseconds. So now what happens to the average waiting time? It's basically 9 plus 15 plus 0 plus 2 divided by 4. It turns out to be 26 by 4, which is 6.5 milliseconds. Right? In a similar way, can you calculate what is the turnaround time for each of these processes and average turnaround time? Right? So let's calculate for each of the process. What is turnaround time for process P1? That is the total time it took in waiting plus execution. So you see here Gantt chart will say that P1 completed by 17th millisecond and P1 arrived at 0th millisecond. So it spent in between this time 0 to 17 millisecond. It was either waiting or it was executing. That's basically what is our turnaround time. So it is 17 minus 0. So turnaround time of P1 is 17 millisecond. What about P2? P2 completed at 5th second and it arrived at 1st millisecond. So it is 5 minus 1. It spent totally 4 millisecond in our system. What about P3? P3 completed by 26th millisecond and it arrived at 2 milliseconds. So in between that 26 minus 2, it spent 24 milliseconds in our system. And what about P4? Can you quickly calculate and tell me? Yes, you are all correct. It is 7 milliseconds. P4 completed its execution by 10th millisecond and its arrival time is 3. So it is 10 minus 3. It is 7 millisecond. Bhargav, you are supposed to subtract the arrival time, not the burst time. Don't get confused with it. So it is 10 minus 3, which is basically 7 milliseconds. Now, what is the average turnaround time? It is 17 plus 4 plus 24 plus 7 divided by 4, which turns out to be 52 by 4, which is 13 milliseconds. Right? So this is how the preemptive shortest remaining time first algorithm basically works. Any confusion with this? If there are none, I'll proceed further. So next one is basically priority scheduling. Now a priority is assigned with every process. So is it a low priority one or a high priority one? So CPU is allocated to a process which has a highest priority. Smaller the number, it is higher the priority is the assumption that we are going to follow. So somebody has a priority of 1 is considered on a importance when you compare it with somebody having a priority of 10. Okay. Now what will happen here? Let's take up this particular example. There are 5 processes P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5 with expected burst time being 10, 1, 2, 1 and 5 with priorities being 3, 1, 4, 5 and 2. And as usual, we are assuming that all of them arrived at time 0 itself. So let us construct a Gantt chart for it. So time 0, all 5 processes are there. So you're going to give the processor to a process whose priority is the highest. So who is having the highest priority? Priority 1 is here, that is for process P2. So we are going to give the CPU to process P2 over there, right? Because its priority is highest there. How long? For the expected burst time of 1 millisecond. So between 0 to 1, our process P2 is going to execute this particular process there. Clear? What happens next? After first millisecond, the next highest priority is going to be considered. So we are having priority 2 here for process P5. That means to say process P5 will execute the job. How long? Till it completes 5 milliseconds of burst time. So between 1 to 1 plus 5, that is between 1 to 6 millisecond, process P5 is going to execute and it is going to do the job. And once it is done, next highest priority is for priority 3, that is for process P1. So between 6 plus 10, that is between 6 to 16 millisecond, process P1 is going to execute. What next? Next highest priority is for process P3. So that's going to occupy the system. How long? For 2 millisecond. That is between 16 plus 2. That is between 16 to 18 millisecond. It is going to occupy. And the last one is basically process P5, which has a P4, which has a priority of 5 and which is be executing for 1 millisecond between 18 to 19 milliseconds. So that's how we get this particular Gantt chart over there. Now as usual, let us calculate the waiting time for each of them. Process P1 started execution at 6 milliseconds, so its waiting time is 6 minus 0, that is 6. Process P2 started execution at time interval 0, so it didn't wait at all, so its waiting time is 0. Process P3 started execution at 16th millisecond, so it is 16 minus its arrival time, that's 0. So you get the answer as 16. Process P4 started its execution at 18th millisecond and process P5 started its execution at 1st millisecond. So its waiting time is 1. So the average waiting time turns out to be 6 plus 0 plus 16 plus 18 plus 1, that is 41 divided by 5, turns out to be 8.2 milliseconds. Clear? Any doubts with it? Is priority scheduling preemptive one? Both versions can be implemented, preemptive as well as non-preemptive, but it makes sense to go with a preemptive version. In this particular case, all of them, we assume that all of them are going to appear at time 0. So preemption did not come into picture, but if they are arriving at different times with different priorities, yes, it makes sense to make a preemptive version, because priority, suppose you say that somebody is, let us say at 18th second, or let us say 16th second, P3 is executing whose priority is 4. 17th second, let us say another process P6 comes whose priority is 1. Okay, so it makes sense to take out the processor from process P3 and assign it to P6 because it's having a higher priority over there. So we can implement a preemptive version over there. Right? So look at the turnaround time in each of these cases. What is the turnaround time for P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5? Turnaround time for P1 completes its job at 16 milliseconds since all of them have arrived at time 0. So Turnaround time for P1 is 16. Yeah, Durga Lakshmi has given me the answer, but it's not in the sequence. I think she followed the Gantt chart model. P2's turnaround time is 1 minute, 1 millisecond. P3's turnaround time is 18 millisecond, and P4's turnaround time is 19 millisecond, and that of P5 it is 6 milliseconds. Right? Now look at the average of this. So it is 16 plus 1 plus 18 plus 19 plus 6. That will be the summation. That turns out to be 17, 35, 41, 50, 60. 60 milliseconds divided by 5 number of processes. So it turns out to be 12 millisecond. Average turnaround time turns out to be 12 milliseconds in this case. Right, so this is about priority scheduling, but there are problem with priority scheduling, that is starvation. So what is starvation? The one that is happening to you and me at 12:57 is starvation. We are hungry, right? So the starvation in this particular case is some of the low priority process will never get a chance to execute. For example, let us say we are executing a preemptive priority scheduling. Say P1 is basically executing at, let us say, 10th millisecond, and suddenly P6 will come whose priority is 1. So as soon as it is done, let us say P7 will come whose priority is 1. After that P8 will come, let us say, whose priority is 2. P9 will come whose priority is 1. And like this, if it continues, then our poor processors P3 and P4 will never get the CPU at all, because they are having a higher priority being 4 and 5. It will never get a chance to execute. So they will be starving for the processor. Right? So this particular problem is called as starvation. The low priority jobs will never get the chance to execute, or even if they get, it is very late. They have to wait for a quite a bit of time. So this problem is called as starvation, which is likely to happen with preemptive version of priority scheduling. What is the solution? We will do it something called as aging. That means, so every time a particular low priority process is going to wait, whose priority will keep increasing by a small quantity. Say after every 10 millisecond, I will raise the priority, I will decrease or I will increase the priority of that particular process. For example, let us say P4 is our processor whose priority is 5. So it is keep on waiting for its chance. Let us say after waiting for 10 millisecond, just a number that I am saying. In reality, OS will fix a number. After 10 milliseconds of waiting, the priority of P4 will increase. That means we basically decrease this number. From 5, it will become 4. And again after another 10 millisecond, that 4 becomes 3. Another after 10 millisecond, that 3 becomes 2, and so on. It continues until it gets a chance to execute it. See, by aging, what we are trying to do is we are increasing the priority of the low priority job depending on how much time it is basically kept in the waiting queue there. So the starvation problem will gradually solve with this particular technique. It will not solve immediately, but as and when it starts waiting, so its priority increases. At least at some point, it will definitely catch hold of the processor and it will get the job done over there. So this is the solution for the starvation problem. We call it as aging over there. Right, so that's it for today's class. We add one more algorithm, but we are done with the time, so let us take it up in the next class.